you are to find. He's the bolo. Bolo. And take him in and drag his ass here. Because of Lucifer, he won't come here.
Come here. No, you're under arrest. Come here.
No, I'm not.
Yes, you are. Come here.
No, I'm not.
Come here. You're under arrest. Come.
No, I'm not.
Lindsay, give me your hand.
No, I'm not.
Lindsay.
No, I'm not.
Yeah. Stop.
No, I'm not.
Stop.
Damn it.
Stop.
No, I'm not. I didn't do anything
Lindsay,
wrong.
stop. Turn around. You're going to get tased.
Get up.
You're
You need to calm down. You're gonna get tased.
Whose head? Whose head?
Me.
Tell me now.
Hold on.
Get up.
There is a moment, a split second, when a routine call becomes something else entirely. The officers who responded to Riverside Motel on the night of October 14th thought they were headed to a simple disturbance, a guest causing problems, a person making noise, nothing they hadn't handled 100 times before. But the woman waiting for them in room 112 was not having a bad night. She was not drunk. She was not simply angry. She was somewhere else entirely, somewhere the officers could not follow. Her name was Lindsay Rozner. She was 39 years old. She had a history. She had a past that had brushed against the law more than once. And on this particular Tuesday evening, she had decided with absolute conviction that she was the daughter of God. What happened next was recorded on body cam footage that has since been viewed millions of times online. It is uncomfortable to watch. It is complicated to understand. And it raises questions that go far beyond one woman in one motel room on one autumn night. This is her story. This is what the cameras captured. And this is what those images force us to confront. A Tuesday night in October, the kind of night that is already forgetting summer. The air had that edge to it, cool, just slightly damp, the kind that makes people pull their jacket a little tighter without thinking about it. The Riverside Motel sat along a commercial stretch of road that had seen better decades. It was the kind of place that filled its rooms with people in transit, people between one chapter of their lives and the next, truckers passing through, workers on a tight budget, travelers who needed a bed and nothing more. The front desk clerk had been on shift since 3 in the afternoon. By 9:30, the evening had been entirely unremarkable. Most guests were in their rooms. The parking lot held about a dozen cars. A few lights glowed behind curtains. A television murmured somewhere down the first-floor corridor. Then the noise started. The clerk described it later as a sound that seemed to come from everywhere at once. A voice, a woman's voice, but not the kind of voice that signals argument or frustration. This was something different, sustained, rhythmic, completely without inhibition. She was shouting things, full sentences, about God, about salvation, about forces no one else in that building could see. Other guests began calling the front desk. Some knocked on their walls. At 9:31 p.m., the clerk dialed 911. The dispatcher logged the call as a disturbance report. Possible emotionally disturbed person, room 112, no weapons mentioned, no physical altercation at that point. Officers Darren Colby and Maria Vega were approximately 4 minutes away. They had no reason to think this would be anything other than a standard welfare check. That assumption would not survive the first 30 seconds of contact. Officers Colby and Vega pulled into the motel lot at 9:35 p.m. Both had their body cams active. They checked in with dispatch, confirmed the room number, and walked the outdoor corridor toward room 112. Even from 15 feet away, they could hear her. Not screaming, not exactly. It was more like proclamation. A voice at full volume, flat in pitch, the way someone sounds when they are not speaking to another person. They were speaking to the air, to whatever audience they believed was there. Colby and Vega exchanged a look. Both had received crisis intervention training. The protocol in situations involving a potentially disturbed individual is measured deliberate and non-confrontational when possible. You slow down. You speak calmly. You do not escalate. Officer Vega knocked on the door. "Ma'am, this is the police. We received a call about some noise. Can you come speak with us, please?" A pause. Then the voice again. Louder now, as if the knock had been a signal. "I am the daughter of God. You cannot touch me. I was sent here. I was sent here." Vega knocked again, identified herself again. More words came back about a conspiracy, about government surveillance, about the end times being near. Colby later told investigators that his immediate read was a mental health crisis. The content of what she was saying, the way she was saying it, the complete disconnect between her internal world and the situation in front of her. He asked the front desk clerk to use a master key to open the door. That moment, the door swinging open was the point of no return. Because inside room 112, the situation was already further along than either officer had imagined. And Lindsay Rozner was not going to come quietly. The door opened. The body cam footage captures the moment in its entirety. Lindsay Rozner was standing in the center of the room. She was not sitting. She was not attempting to hide or escape. She was standing directly in the middle of the floor, arms slightly raised as if mid-sermon. The room around her told part of the story. The window screen, the mesh screen that fits into the frame beside the bed, had been pulled loose and partially torn. The curtains were pushed back. A chair had been moved. Personal items were scattered. But Rozner herself appeared physically uninjured. No weapons were visible. Officer Colby spoke first. "Ma'am, I need you to lower your voice. I need you to talk to us." She turned to look at him. And for a moment, just a moment, the shouting stopped. She looked at him the way someone looks when they have been interrupted mid-thought. Then she said very clearly, "You are here because they sent you, but you cannot stop what has already begun." Vega stepped inside, kept her voice level, kept her distance. "Nobody sent us to stop you. We just want to make sure you're okay. Can you tell us your name?" The answer was not a name. The answer was another round of declarations. About divinity, about divine protection, about the world not understanding what was happening. And then something shifted. Rozner moved toward the window. Not toward the officers, not aggressively, but she grabbed at what was left of the torn screen and pulled. There was a tearing sound. A piece of the frame came away in her hand. Colby stepped toward her. "Stop. Stop right there. Put that down." She did not put it down. What happened next took less than 90 seconds, and it changed everything about that night. The moment Colby reached for her arm, she pulled away. Hard. Fast. The kind of resistance that is not calculated, it is reflexive. She did not stop shouting. If anything, the physical contact made it louder. "Do not touch me. You cannot touch me. I am protected." Vega moved to assist. The body cam footage is chaotic here. It always is in these moments. The camera swings, the angle tilts. There are sounds, but not always clear images. What the footage does show clearly from Colby's camera is the moment his face turns. He jerks back. His hand goes to his face. Later, investigators and medical staff would confirm Lindsay Rozner had kicked Officer Colby in the face during the struggle to restrain her. She was not using a weapon, but a boot connects with a jaw the same way regardless of intent. Vega got control of Rozner's wrists. A second unit officers, Huang and Pratt, arrived within 2 minutes, responding to the assistance call Colby had called in even as the struggle was happening. 4 officers, 1 woman. It still took several minutes to get her secured. She did not stop talking the entire time. Not screaming exactly, she never went completely incoherent. But the declarations kept coming. About God, about purpose, about what was waiting on the other side of all of this. Once she was secured and moved to a standing position, Officer Huang activated his own camera. The footage now has 4 angles, and from all 4 of them, the same thing is clear. Lindsay Rozner was not fighting out of anger. She was fighting because she genuinely believed she had the right to. She was walked out of room 112, past the clerk who'd called this in, past the guests who had opened their doors a crack to see what was happening, past the parking lot and the cool October air, and the ordinary world she no longer seemed to be part of. She was placed in the back of a patrol vehicle. The cameras kept rolling, and the night was far from over. The ride to the station was not quiet. Rozner kept talking, not threatening, not pleading, just talking. The recordings from the transport vehicle capture fragments. The name of God mentioned repeatedly. References to missions, references to persecution. At no point did she ask for a lawyer. At no point did she ask what she was being charged with. She seemed, in the truest sense, to be operating on a completely different frequency. By the time she arrived at the station and was processed, it was approaching 11 p.m. Investigators made the decision to place her in an interview room and attempt to speak with her. Not because they expected a traditional interrogation. They needed to assess her level of orientation, her capacity to understand what was happening to her. Detective Armand Selwyn drew the assignment. Selwyn had 15 years on the job. He had conducted hundreds of interviews. He had sat across from people who had done terrible things, people who were lying, people who were terrified. He would later say that Lindsay Rozner was one of the most difficult interviews he had ever conducted. Not because she was dangerous, because she was unreachable. He entered the room at 11:14 p.m. She was seated. Her hands were folded on the table. She looked at him. "I know why you're here," she said before he had spoken a single word. He sat down. He kept his notepad visible but did not open it immediately. He said, "Tell me." She told him. It took 47 minutes. And in those 47 minutes, Detective Selwyn heard things that were equal parts heartbreaking and deeply troubling. Lindsay Rozner did not deny being at the motel. She did not deny making noise. She did not deny damaging the window screen. What she denied was simpler and more fundamental than any of those things. She denied that any of it was wrong. In her account, the account she gave freely without pressure, with an almost eerie calmness, she had not been causing a disturbance. She had been delivering a message. She had been placed at the Riverside Motel because there was someone in that building who needed to hear what she had to say. The message was about the coming judgment, about the forces aligning in the unseen world, about the role she had been chosen to play. "I don't expect you to understand," she told Selwyn. "Most people don't. That's the point. I was chosen specifically because I'm willing to do what others won't." Selwyn asked her about Officer Colby. She paused. For the first time in the interview, she seemed to lose her certainty just slightly. "I don't remember kicking anyone," she said. "Do you remember the officers coming into the room?" "Yes." "Do you remember them trying to take hold of you?" "Yes. And I told them they couldn't do that. I told them I was protected." "Do you understand that they were doing their job?" She looked at him steadily. "I understand that you have a job," she said. "I have one too. Mine is more important." Selwyn asked about her past. He did not have to dig for it. It was already in the file. Multiple prior contacts with law enforcement, disturbance calls in other locations, prior arrests that had not resulted in serious convictions. A pattern that when Selwyn looked at it told a story that the interview room was now making clear. This was not the first time, and the system, such as it is, had not found a way to stop it. When Selwyn asked about medication, she shook her head. When he asked about mental health treatment, she said she had received help in the past, but that she no longer needed it because she now understood what her purpose was. Selwyn closed his notepad. He told her that officers would be in to explain the charges. She nodded as if she had already known this moment was coming. As he stood to leave, she said, "You'll understand eventually. Everyone does." He left the room. He stood in the hallway for a moment. Then he went to find the lead detective. What happened in room 112 took less than 10 minutes from first contact to transport, but the work that followed took weeks. The investigation into the Riverside Motel incident was not complicated in the way that many true crime cases are. There was no missing evidence. There was no question about who was present. There were 4 officers with body cams. There was a motel security system with exterior cameras. There was a front desk clerk who had seen and heard everything. The investigation was in some ways a process of documentation. But documentation is not always simple. It requires precision. It requires cross-referencing. It requires that every piece of evidence be accounted for and verified. The body cam footage was downloaded, reviewed, and timestamped by the department's technical unit within 24 hours. All 4 cameras were functioning. All 4 captured clear audio. The lighting in the room, a standard motel overhead fixture, was sufficient for visual documentation. The physical evidence was cataloged. The damaged window screen was photographed in place, then collected. Investigators measured the tear in the mesh. They documented the partial frame damage. Officer Colby was examined by the department's medical officer on the same night. The injury to his face, a contusion along his jawline, was photographed and documented. A formal medical examination occurred the following morning. The findings confirmed blunt force contact consistent with a kick. Colby did not require hospitalization, but the injury was real, and it was on the record. Investigators also compiled Rozner's prior contact history with law enforcement. What emerged was a timeline. Not of violence, her prior contacts were not predominantly violent, but of escalating incidents. Incidents that suggested a person whose contact with reality had been deteriorating in visible ways over a number of years. Prior disturbance calls, prior intervention attempts, a history of treatment that had not been sustained. It painted a picture, not a simple picture, not one that fit neatly into either villain or victim, a complicated one, a human one. That picture would matter when the case reached the courts. Lindsay Rozner was formally charged with 3 counts. The first, disturbing the peace. This charge addressed the sustained high-volume disturbance she had created at the motel, the shouting, the proclamations, the behavior that had caused other guests to call for help. Under the relevant statutes, disturbing the peace involves conduct that is disruptive to the reasonable quiet and order of a public or shared space. The motel with its shared corridors and thin walls qualified. If convicted on this count alone, the maximum exposure was a fine and up to 90 days in county jail. The second charge carried more weight: destruction of property, the damaged window screen, property belonging to the motel. The documentation photographs collected evidence. The damage assessment provided by motel management was clear. This charge carried a potential fine and up to 1 year in county jail, depending on the assessed value of the damage. The third charge was the most serious: Battery on a peace officer. This charge, which in many jurisdictions is treated as a felony rather than a misdemeanor depending on severity, addressed the kick that had connected with Officer Colby's face. Under the laws applicable in this jurisdiction, battery on a peace officer does not require serious injury. Contact that is intentional or reckless is sufficient. The body cam footage and the injury documentation made this charge straightforward in evidentiary terms. The potential penalty for this charge as a felony count ranged from 16 months to 3 years in state prison. However, as the case developed, the question of Rozner's mental state became central. Her defense attorney entered a plea of not guilty. Simultaneously, they filed a motion for a mental competency evaluation. This is not uncommon in cases where the defendant's behavior during the incident raises genuine questions about their understanding of reality. A court-appointed psychologist evaluated Rozner over 2 separate sessions. The evaluation took into account her behavior at the motel, the content of her statements to police and to Detective Selwyn, her prior treatment history, and her conduct during the evaluation itself. The findings were provided to the court under seal. The outcome of those findings shaped what happened next. The court accepted a negotiated resolution. Rozner was convicted on the disturbing the peace and destruction of property counts. On the battery charge, the court accepted a reduced plea to misdemeanor battery in light of the mental health evaluation findings and her documented history of untreated psychiatric crisis. She received a sentence that included time served, a period of supervised probation, and critically, a court-mandated mental health treatment program. It was not the sentence that the prosecutors had initially sought. It was not the outcome that Officer Colby had perhaps hoped for, but it was the outcome that the evidence, the law, and the complicated reality of this particular case produced. And that reality deserves to be looked at honestly. This is where the story gets harder. The body cam footage from the Riverside Motel has been watched by millions of people. Some watched it and saw a dangerous person resisting police. Some watched it and saw a woman in the grip of a mental health crisis being met with force she was not capable of processing. Both reactions are understandable. Both are in different ways missing something. Detective Selwyn, who has spoken about this case in the time since, made an observation that stuck with the investigators on this file. He said, "The camera shows you what happens. It doesn't tell you why, and the why is the whole thing." What the camera showed was a woman who was not responsive to verbal de-escalation. Not because she was refusing to listen, but because she was not, in the functional sense, capable of hearing the officers in the way they needed her to hear them. When Officer Vega said, "We just want to make sure you're okay," that sentence carried a specific meaning. Rozner processed it through a completely different framework. In her mind, in the world she was inhabiting, that night the officers were not concerned citizens in uniform. They were part of this test, part of the mission, part of something larger than any of them could see. Psychologists who reviewed the case material, not for the court, but for academic analysis of the footage, describe what they observed as consistent with a psychotic episode. Grandiose delusions, religious ideation, impaired reality testing. These are not character flaws, they are symptoms. But symptoms have consequences, and consequences do not stop to wait for a diagnosis. The moment Rozner kicked Officer Colby, she was not, in the clinical sense, fully aware of what she was doing. She was responding to a perceived threat within a reality that no one else in that room could access. But Colby's jaw did not care about her reality. The injury was real, and this is the knot at the center of these cases. The law is built for people who act with awareness of what they are doing. Reality, messy, complicated. Human reality does not always cooperate. The interview footage is perhaps the most revealing part of the entire record, not because of what Rozner confessed or denied, but because of the way she spoke. She was not cagey, she was not performing. She was sincere. And sincerity in the wrong direction is one of the most frightening things a trained investigator can encounter. When a person believes fully in something that has no grounding in shared reality and acts on that belief with complete conviction, you are not dealing with calculation. You are dealing with something that the justice system was not originally designed to handle. And yet the justice system is what we have. And it is what was waiting for Lindsay Rozner. This part is different. In cases like these cases that get reduced to body cam clips and comment threads, it is easy for a person to become a category, a symbol, a cautionary tale, something to argue about. Lindsay Rozner is not a symbol. She is a person. She was 39 years old on the night she walked into the Riverside Motel. 39 years old means she had a childhood, a history, a life that existed in full before anyone pointed a camera at it. What we know from the case record is limited, but it is something. We know she had engaged with the mental health system before. At some point in her life, there had been a recognition by her or by people around her or by the system that she needed help. That help, for reasons that often have more to do with access, cost consistency, and the profound difficulty of treating certain mental health conditions, than with any single failure had not held. We know she had prior contacts with law enforcement. That means she had been in this place before standing at the intersection of crisis and consequence, and had not found a way through it that led anywhere stable. We know that on October 14th, she was alone in a motel room. What brought her there that night is not entirely clear from the record. But most people who end up alone in a motel room on a Tuesday night in October are carrying something. A loss, a rupture, a life that has fractured in ways they do not have the tools to repair. The people who watched the body cam footage and commented that she seemed dangerous were not wrong exactly. She was in that moment a threat to the safety of the officers trying to help her. But dangerous in a moment and a dangerous person are not the same sentence. Lindsay Rozner was in the most fundamental sense a person who was suffering. She was suffering in a way that she experienced as divine purpose, which is in its own way one of the most complete forms of suffering there is. To be in that much pain and to have no framework for it, and to have built out of necessity or out of illness a story that transforms the pain into something sacred. She was not acting, she was not manipulating. She was surviving, badly, in ways that hurt other people. But surviving, that deserves to be said clearly. Before the charges are listed, before the sentence is described, before the analysis begins. A person, a complicated, struggling, suffering person, who deserved better than a motel room and a 911 call. The Riverside Motel case did not become famous because it was unique. It became famous because it was common. Officers Colby and Vega are not the first responders to walk into a room and discover that the situation calls for skills and resources they were not fully trained to deploy. Crisis intervention training exists. It is valuable. Both officers had received it. But training has limits. When the gap between a person's internal reality and the external world has grown wide enough, when the language of de-escalation finds no purchase, because the person is not operating within a shared framework, training alone cannot bridge that distance. This is not a criticism of the officers. It is an observation about a structural gap that exists in how societies respond to mental health crises. The 911 system was built for emergencies, for fires, for crimes in progress, for accidents. It was not designed as a primary mental health response system. And yet in city after city, in county after county, the 911 dispatcher has become the default gateway to help for people in psychiatric crisis. Because they are available, because they are fast, because they have authority. What they do not always have is the specific training, the specific resources, or the specific mandate to provide mental health intervention. This is changing. In some places, co-responder programs where a mental health professional accompanies or responds alongside law enforcement have shown real results. Mobile crisis teams dispatched independently of police in lower-risk situations have shown real results. These are not perfect solutions. Nothing in this space is perfect. But they represent an acknowledgement that the body cam footage from room 112 is not just a document of one night. It is a document of a gap between the crises people experience and the resources available to meet them. Officer Colby returned to duty after his injury healed. He later participated in a panel discussion about mental health and law enforcement response. He said something that stayed with the people in the room. He said, "I don't know how we could have done that night differently with what we had, but I know we need to have more." That is not an excuse. It is not a defense. It is an honest statement from a person who was there. And it is worth holding on to, because the answer to what happened at Riverside Motel is not simpler policing. It is not harsher sentencing. It is not a single policy change or a single program or a single moment of political will. It is harder than that. It is the long, difficult, resource-intensive work of building a society that can actually reach people like Lindsay Rozner before they end up alone in a motel room, screaming at the walls. That work is not glamorous. It does not make for compelling body cam footage, but it is the only thing that actually changes the outcome. A motel room on a Tuesday night, that is where this story takes place. Not in a courtroom drama, not in a high-stakes thriller. A motel room. Room 112, a torn window screen, 4 officers in a narrow corridor. A woman who believed with every cell in her body that she had been sent there for a reason. The body cam footage has been seen by millions of people. Most of them watched it and moved on. A few did not. The officers who were there that night have not moved on entirely. These kinds of calls stay with you. Not because they are the most dangerous you will ever see, but because they are the ones where the right answer was never available. Lindsay Rozner has not moved on in the sense that whatever brought her to that motel room has not been resolved by a court date or a sentencing hearing. The roots of that night go deeper than one evening, and the question of whether the treatment program she was ordered into will reach those roots, whether any program can, is not one that a documentary can answer. What we can do is ask the question honestly. We can watch the footage and resist the easy response. We can resist the impulse to look at a woman in crisis and see only a threat. We can resist the impulse to look at the officers responding and see only antagonists. We can sit with the uncomfortable truth that both things are happening at once, a threat and a crisis, a response and a limitation, a system doing what it was built to do and revealing in doing so exactly what it was not built to do. Every 39-year-old alone in a motel room was once a child who needed something they did not get. That is not an excuse. It is a question about where the failure begins, about who is responsible for catching people before they fall this far, about what we owe each other in a society that calls itself civilized. Lindsay Rozner will carry October 14th with her for the rest of her life. So will Officer Colby. So will Officer Vega. So will the desk clerk who made the call, and the guests who pressed their ears to the walls, and the detective who sat across a table from a woman who could not hear him. So should we, because the next motel room is already occupied, and the next person in crisis is already there. And the question of who shows up and what they bring with them is a question we are still answering. It is a question we do not have the luxury of getting wrong. Thank you for watching. If this case raises questions for you about mental health resources in your area for yourself or for someone you know, please reach out. You are not alone in that room. None of us are.